Hello everyone. Today I'm going to be taking you through how I created a basic survival wave game such as survivor.io using Coplay in Unity. In this project, I mainly use Gemini 3 Pro and then Chat GPT 5.2, as I found those two were working the best for me, and I switched between them when I wasn't getting stuff I wanted to work correctly. And I will be displaying you all of this with a pre-recorded video, and I'll be taking you through all of it. Okay, so here you can see where I started with my first prompt. I told it I want to do a top-down horde survival game using assets. I had multiple assets that I added in, such as the main character, the enemies, and separate, and the boss. And I asked it to first do a 8-directional movement system, so for the player to walk around on a 2D plane. Then using object pooling system to save on performance, to handle the waves of the enemies and how they come in, and then swarm AI to create enemy that will, when they spawn, they will chase directly towards a player, and through the waves it will start getting more and more and harder, but also I will be upgrades that you'll be getting throughout the game so that you can strengthen your character and get different abilities and attacks and stat upgrades. And then particles for like hits and attacks. So the first thing Coplay does is set up the task list as well to know that's everything that needs to be done, and then continues on. So here in the start, you can see I'm using ChatGPT 5.2, and the first thing it does, it creates the scripts, the camera follow, and then the movement script is the first thing it's going to do because that's the first task. Then it's creating the game arena, the game for the players using cubes as basic asset, and setting their positions in the scene, sets the background, and sets the walls around the scene so that the player cannot exit the game area. And here it is setting up just all the components. And I was running this all on auto approve because I find it works well enough for me. And this is also all running on normal mode. So here it is setting up the asset import for the character and all the other points where it needs the asset. You can see importing the asset. So the asset was stored in sprite sheets, and it automatically is going to go slice up the sprite sheet for the animations. Like here you can see it first populated the scene, but it does get it right in the end. Here's writing a script to fix the sprite setup, and there you can see it's only one sprite now in the scene. It checks the compiler errors to make sure everything it did doesn't cause a break in the game. Takes a screenshot to verify everything it did. And here's the task list of everything it did in the scene. So the movement system, set up the enemy foundations, the health, the characteristics, how it swarms, how the damage system works, and setting up the spawner. Did the pooling system to improve performance, then added a boss multi-phase system. Okay, and then I tested it and the animations weren't playing for the player, so it set up a task list to fix that. It added a new script, top-down player animator, to fix the animation or to set it up, and a new script to auto set up all the animation. You can see there here on the right, it sets up idle, run, attack when it takes damage, and then the death animation for the player. Executes that script, checks for compiler errors, takes a screenshot. Here you can see everything that was done. So it sliced the 126 by 26 frames sheets to set up the animations, adds an animation controller, runtime driver, and then sets up that everything can trigger properly. So the idle animation was working properly, but I found out when I was running it, the running animation was constantly just restarting, so it was running for 1 frame the whole time, and then the attack animation wasn't playing. Here you can see on the screen the animation for idle is working as it does a run test, and getting all the logs to make sure why it isn't happening or is what is happening. And here it sees the slicer sliced incorrectly and updated the problems. Okay, so the animations were now working properly. Now I just wanted to, because there were 3 attacks in the, here you can see in the asset that it should cycle through the attacks when attacking. So I wanted it to set that up. First it sets up the new task list, updates the auto setup script to add the new things, and then checks the compiler errors after executing those scripts, checks the logs that nothing is broken, updates the script again, executes it, fixed the texture size with a script, ran into a console error, went to fix it, another one, and starts script, executes it again. And at this point, again edits the script, animation setup, and executes the script again, checks for compiler errors, executes the script, updates the task list, has done 12 of the 13, and everything had changed. So it updated the animations, added the 3 asset attacks, added an index so it can rotate through these 3 attacks, and update the scripts to cycle through these animations properly. For the next part, I asked it to now implement the spawning script it created. Just for the generic enemies, the boss can be done later. So it go gets those scripts that has been created. At this point, I switched to Gemini 3 Pro because I felt like it was for this working better for me and faster. And it's setting all the components up in the scene, making sure all this thing, everything is set up correctly. Adding all the sprites for the slime, as the slime is going to be the basic enemy. And originally, I changed that. I did ask it to change it to a different enemy later. Setting up the pool manager to pull all the enemies in there to save on performance. Here you can see everything it did. It fixed compilation errors. There were a few problems. Created the enemy prefabs, added all the stuff it needed to it, like the rigid body, the colliders, the animations. I set up the prefab to save it for it to be spawned. Created an enemy wave directed for controlling how the waves of enemies work. Now I asked if the enemies were dying and everything. I wanted it to add health bars to the enemies so that know if you actually are doing damage to the enemies. And the enemy sprites were a bit broken. It wasn't sliced properly. It was just placing all the animations sprites in the scene. It's trying to fix all the slime, the sprites. So it created the health bars for the enemies, and then created the attack script for the player so that the player can actually damage the enemies, and then set up enemy sprites so that it's properly working. So the main problem I ran into, the health bars were taking up the whole scene and I couldn't see anything else, and then the sprites were still not properly sliced. So it's going ahead to fix all these problems now. And in this bit, it updated the health bar size changed it to world space render so it isn't taking up all the screen. It didn't change the size enough, but I'll get into that fix next. Slice the slime run sheet so that it looks better and actually looks animation. Told it was still too big, so it changed the health bar prefab size, and the size delta was updated. But as you can see, it was still taking up the whole scene. Again, asked it to fix it. You can see it's a bit more acceptable size, but it's not small enough. And it's going through and adjusting everything, setting up the prefabs, setting the properties again. So in this process, it changed the health bar scale, so it would be smaller, change the size, and make sure the prefab actually also updated to properly inherited. Now it made it way too small and it wasn't visible, and it doesn't look like the health bars were actually updating when they were taking damage, even though they were taking damage. So they increased the size of the health bar, made sure the damage was doing properly. You can see me playing it, testing it, they were dying. I told it the size was still too small and need to update that as well. Here you can see it manually edit the prefabs to fix the sizing and added it to the prefabs. And I was saying the damage wasn't always registering when I was playing it and wasn't always updating the health bar. Go and fix that. It fixed it, saying the pulled enemies weren't updating, resetting their health when respawned. And so they couldn't take damage because their health was already below 0. And then the health bar size and position, it fixed that. Okay, now the health bar was still not updating and the sprite was gone for some reason. But it might have also been in conflicting colors because blue on blue doesn't necessarily work. So it said here placeholders was referencing placeholder sprite IDs and wasn't displaying anything correctly. And says it fixed the health bar not properly updating. So here I try to, as Gemini wasn't fixing it, I switched to Chat GPT 5.2 again to see if it could fix the animations and the health bar. Sets up a 6-point task list. It gets all the files, reads them first, gets the info, gets access to all the files, reads the files, and then setting property on the camera to try and fix the visibility of the sprite, sets up a debug, and now it's trying to fix the health bar issue. It's trying to fix the updated references so it doesn't disappear, and then it ran into an error. But I told it to continue where it left off because it was updating the task list. Updates the task list, says it fixed everything, checks the prefab references to make sure it's visible, and it's still trying to figure. And I was like, okay, maybe just try and restart the enemy setup from the beginning so that it works properly. And you can see the task list has set itself up. You can see the health part set up. And here it's set up says the completed summary. It says animations were not playing, health was not updating. It ended up missing references, so I fixed it. And it was referencing a non-existing animation, so it had to change that and fix it. And so it changed existing, created the new slime controller, rebuilt a fresh enemy prefab controller, added an enemy animation driver script, tried to it fixed the health bar, hooked the spawner to the prefab, and it didn't find any compiler states. Here you can see the health bars are too big and they aren't updating when taking damage. Here it's testing it. You could see it was still too big, but it's first updating the health updates. In the end, I did tell it to the health bar they were using a full image, where in the end I told it to use a slider because in my experience sliders just work best for health bars. There you can see the size was way too big. Trying to fix the transform issues, saying that was probably the issue. See, the size is a lot smaller and a bit better, but the health bars were still not updating and the slimed animation were not working. You see me testing it, was still not working. Here it says what it changed, update the health bar size, that it did correctly, and the health bars, it says it fixed it, but they were still not updating. You can see me testing it. They are dying and everything, they're just not dying. So I asked it to another asset pack that I added in for Bandits. It already has animations already in it, so it just has to apply it to the 2D sprite. I told it to replace the slimes with these bandits, and also to set up the injured animation when they take damage. So it sets up the 7 list task list, implements the bandit rituals to set up the bandit script, and it did that, all those tasks using those few steps. Fixes the bandit, checks the scene to if it's properly implemented. So what it did, it created a new prefab for the bandit enemy. It was based on the slime prefab, but it adapted it for the bandit. Set up the animation controller for the enemy, idle, run, hurt, and death. The idle is controlled by the movement speed. The hurt is triggered when the enemy takes damage. So injured animation. Death is triggered when the health reaches 0. I created a script to handle the animation logic. Update this enemy wave director to spawn the enemy bandit instead of the slimes. Okay, so I ran into the same issue that originally happened with the player. The walking animation was getting stuck on the first point and wasn't working properly, so it's constantly repeating the first frame. And it did fix it there. So it was relying on rigid body velocity. It wasn't properly working, so it calculated the speed now on the fixed update instead of rigid body 2D move position in fixed update with a new calculation for it. And it was working properly this time. So now I wanted it to set up the boss for the game, which will be the fireworm asset. You can see the 10-step task list it's set up. Creates a script to set up the fireworm. Sets up a script for the fireball projectile that the fireworm will as its standard attack. Health setup. Sets up the AI script for the handles how the boss will behave. Finish setting it up. Task list 10 out of 10. This everything did. It's processed the sprites, split it up, sliced the sprite sheets, properly work into separate animation cycles, created animation clips, created the animators, created scripts, the fireworm AI to handle boss movement, logic, and health events, fire projectile script to handle the fireball's movement and where it's going to shoot. Created prefabs for the fireball and the fireworm, and added an instance of it to the scene just so they can test. And it added the asset back, and there you can see it is visible. You can see what it did. It fixed the sprite slicing, updated the animation controllers. So I had the problem, the boss and the projectiles weren't visible. So it just had to go and fix that. Debugging the sprites to make sure why it wasn't visible, and then just re-added the prefab so that it would work properly. So now it was in scene, all the attack, the movement was working, it's just the animations weren't working. Yeah, you can see, so, but also here I'm back to Gemini 3 Pro. It is rebuilding the animations for the fireworm, updating the AI script. So what it did is fixed the animations, multi-purpose AI added phases to it, a visual cue, so when it goes below 50, the boss will turn reddish hue, and then the stat buff for the boss in the second phase, and added the new attack. Now I just wanted it to go through and fix compiler errors with the handy button here with debug with Coplay, and I told it to remember this boss needs to be multi-phase, so it needs a lot of health and needs multiple attacks. So when the health falls below 50, it needs to have a secondary attack, a whirlwind AoE phase that is triggered when it's below 50% health. Set up the task list. Now it verified all the compiler errors, it fixed them, and now click continue on. I just had another issue that I wanted it to sort out, and we went to fix that. You can see everything it fixed. The animation controller fixed, just fixed the null reference exception, and fixed the controller assignment to the boss. Now, the animations on the boss were perfectly working, the walking, the idle. The problem is the fireball animation was not working. So I told it to go and fix this. It goes access everything, reads all needed, creates a script to fix the fireball animation, and executes it. So what it did is it was missing assignment from the animator, so added it, assigned the animator component to fireball prefab. So it was working perfectly, the animation now. I had a problem with the second stage of the boss where the attack was spawning and all the projectiles from that attack were just instantly destroying themselves with each other. So it wasn't dispersing properly. I told it to go and fix that, so it removed the colliders so they can collide with each other. Okay, for the next thing, I told it to, now that the boss is working, to incorporate it into the wave system, and I wanted like a lot of boss elements in games to have a massive boss health bar on the top of the screen when it appears. It creates the boss health UI. It's going to create UI, but it's also not going to work again. But later on, I did tell it just to change it to a slider, and it works perfectly. So every 2 waves, it's set up now that the boss will spawn, and the health bar will appear and disappear depending if the boss is there. And it implemented it into the wave system. Now, the UI was taking up the whole screen. I told it to fix it. Here you can see it setting it up properly in the scene. It fixed the transformations, and fixed the canvas scaler, and added text above it for the boss name. So here you can see I'm telling it the boss health bar needs to be a slider to show the health accurately. Updates the script, changes it to a slider, and now it will function properly. I did test it and it works perfectly. So now one thing that wasn't implemented yet was a health system for the player, and then also a healing system for the player. I wanted it to set up like standard pickups throughout the map to heal after being picked up, and also wanted the health of the player to be shown in the UI. It sets up the player health UI, sets up the health pickups, and it used green assets from the asset pack. One thing it did have a bit of an issue of the health pickups were a bit out of the borders, but that will be later on fixed. So the problem was the player wasn't losing health and the enemies weren't attacking. The standard enemies, the boss, were attacking. It's updating the health script so it can properly update, and the UI so it properly updates. So everything it did, it made sure the enemy movement properly worked towards the player, verified the damage system, and then player health UI, I changed it from a slider to an image fill instead. And it says to better control it. I told it needs to change it back to a slider because it doesn't with the health fill work like that. It updated it. It doesn't look right now, but it works properly in the scene. and there it tells switched it back. So now I wanted when the player health reaches 0, a game over text screen should pop up with a restart button. Also, I told it to fix the position of the player at the start of the game so that it is in the center of the map, and it needs to repopulate the health pickups throughout the center of the map and to stay within the borders, the invisible borders. It's going to go ahead and do that, fixes the transform and the positioning of everything, creates the end screen text and canvas. In the you can see everything it did. It set up the game over system, repopulated the map and put everything in correct positions, and yeah. So the last problem, it didn't update the spawning position of the boss, and the boss was spawning outside the borders and wasn't able to come in and fight the player, which is a simple fix, just updates the spawning position of the boss, and now it's always within the borders. Now I asked it a bit of a complex one to set up a point pickup system, such as wave survival games where it drops a gem or a coin or something similar when you kill the enemies, and that will build up to a upgrade that you can get, either new weapons with different rarity that is randomized with like skill upgrades, stat upgrades, or new abilities, and upgrading them. And I told it to also, it needs to have different levels of rarity. It goes and sets up the loot dropper script for the enemies and player pickup. It generated the image of a gem for the scene for the pickup, and sets a loot dropper script, sets a upgrade manager script, so update the proper stats properly, creates the UI for the upgrade UI, and it's now creating the logic behind the upgrades. Completed all of that. So it did the gem pickup system, added experience and leveling system, added abilities to upgrade stuff using the upgrade menu, added the UI, and added player integration so that the content in the player scripts can be accessed outside and changed. Okay, for the next thing, the gem size was too large, so when it was picked up, it was covering half the screen, and it wasn't realistic. Oh, wasn't the way I wanted. And then the UI formatting was broken on the upgrades menu, and it wasn't formatted properly. And then I wanted to add 5 new attacks which can be upgraded as well to this upgrade system. And then add UI to the menu for a way to track the points. Adds all the scripts to fix all of this, updates them, adds new logic for the new attacks. Axe throw is one of them. There was a dagger, there was lightning. Here you can see creating the assets for them. And then the orb, shooting orb. Setting up the scene. Setting up the abilities in the scene. Got an error, but fixed it. Executes them again. So you can start with the gem resizing, create XP UI, XP bar bottom of the screen with a full bar and a level text. Upgrade UI fixes with the formatting and everything to properly work. New ability system with the new upgrades and abilities, and created the assets for said things. But here you can see the UI is broken again. So I just took a screenshot of that. And I told it the XP bar needs to be a slider at the bottom of the screen to show the XP gain during the game. It updated that, it fixed the formatting, and moved the XP bar to the bottom, converted it to a slider to properly show, scaled the gems again to be smaller. Now the problem is the size of the new attack sprites were way too big and it was taking up most of the screen when happening. To just scale it down, and it did that. You can see me testing it. The gems are adequate size, and the XP bar at the bottom is filling up, and you can see the menu pop up with different colors for each item and the rarity. So I had the problem the axe wasn't properly doing damage, the upgrade, and it was just passing through enemies and not doing anything. And then the orb that's being shot out was also not doing damage, but the others were working to my knowledge as they should. And it updates those scripts. It created a new script to make sure it does damage. The axe throw, fixed it, and then the orbiting orbs as well. Then I told it for all the abilities it's added, it needs to be upgraded, such as the orbs needs to add a new orb rotating around for every upgrade to a certain amount. It goes and updates the scripts for these new abilities. Updates the upgrade manager. So now the orbiting orb adds a new orb and increases the rotation speed. Magic missile increases the fire rate. Damage by 20% every upgrade. Lightning strike increases damage by 50%. Reduces cooldown by 10%. Dagger throw reduces cooldown, increases damage. Axe throw increases damage and reduces cooldown. And I found the orb spinning around the player was still not doing damage. And then I also added, just for testing purposes, a force upgrade so I can test everything quickly. A button just to skip through the levels. You see, that is still working normally. Getting the lightning, force upgrading just to test everything. Seeing how the menu is randomized, all the orbs are floating around, they're doing damage. So that was the wave survival game. Thank you for watching and have a good day. It's working properly.